Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop, getting ready to start another big custom build project. We're going to start building another mandolin, and this mandolin is going to Chris in Canada, I believe. I'm not sure exactly where Chris lives in Canada because I didn't look it up ahead of time here before I started the camera. You know, Canada's a small place, so you kind of get a general idea where he lives. I think Canada is the second biggest country in the world in terms of landmass, but it's one of the least populated countries in the world, with the population of roughly the state of California in the whole country. So, Chris, I hope you're excited because we're going to build you a really fine mandolin. We've actually already got a jump on it. We've got this done. And what is that, you might ask? Well, that's the neck block. You can see the decorative pieces that I inlay in there, and that's for strength. This would be the flatness of the fretboard area. Then the peg head will come down through here, and the neck heel will be back here. We'll shape all that as we get along, but to see how I glued this block up, you can look to another video, and I'll put the video number on the screen, and I used the vacuum press. So this was the very first neck that I glued up with my new vacuum press systems from the company Vacuum Pressing Systems, and they're in Brunswick, Maine. So if you need a vacuum system for your projects or your workshop, I'm telling you, these things are worth their weight in gold. It changes everything in terms of clamping up things like this. It's really awesome. And I would suggest that you check that video out, and the video number is on the screen. This is where we are on the sides already. So Chris, we're already a little bit ahead on the sides too. We've bent the most difficult piece, and I honestly don't recall which video I may have that in. If I think of it, I'll put it on the screen, but I don't remember at this point when I bent these. But it wasn't too long ago. I just have a lot going on. I can't keep it all straight in my head. But I bent them with the intent of using it on Chris's mandolin down the road. But I think I was doing something else, some other purpose at the time, and I don't remember what that was. The mind is the first thing to go, and I seriously can't remember what the second thing is. I have also sent Chris an email with 2 photos of 2 different backs to select, and I'll let you look at those backs as well, and you can make your decision of which one you think he should select. We have choices number 1, and if I can get them mounted up correctly, you can see it. Very beautiful piece of wood. And we have choice number 3. And number 3 is also very, very beautiful. I would have difficulty choosing myself, so I'm not going to say. I think either one of them will build a beautiful and very nice mandolin. Very loud mandolin, as you know I always build. And then I hand selected this wood for the top, and this is flat gorgeous. If you could find a better piece of wood than this, then you should go buy it because this is as good as it gets when it comes to spruce. Perfectly quarter sawed, perfectly even grain. It's just as good as it gets. Just as straight as a string in the way it grew. You just couldn't ask for a better top board than what I have in my hand right here. So that ought to ensure that we're going to have a wonderful mandolin. To save myself just a little time and a little video footage, I didn't film the flattening these 2 pieces. What I did was I ran them through my joiner. I've got a very nice joiner and it works really well. And I squared up the edges and flattened the edges, and they were almost perfect from the joiner. But then I took them on a piece of 220 sandpaper on the jointer table and ran it just a couple of strokes wherever they were touching, and if I could see light through at the end, which I could, I just ran it on the sandpaper on the high spot here. And I did that on both pieces, and seriously now I'm up here at the window. The window is right behind the camera, and I'm holding it up like so, and I can't see a speck of daylight through there anywhere. It is absolutely perfectly tight. So that's a perfect joint. That'll make a very fine hairline glue joint. And that's what we're gonna do right now, is glue that up. Enough talk, let's get started. Well friends, you can see I've got everything laid out here to get me started. I'll need more clamps than this, but this will get me started. And I'm using Titebond Original, as I pretty much always do. This is another one of those situations, kind of like when you're gluing on a bridge. This is no place to skimp on your glue. You want to make sure you get 100% coverage. And that doesn't mean that you want it real thick. In fact, you don't. You want it real thin, but you want it 100% coverage. It pays to take a little extra time and just make sure that you get it covered really good. Okay, I think that passes my test for really good coverage. And I'm going to pull this up to the end here where I can turn these handles a little better. When you first start doing this, they like to move around on you, so you just kind of have to take your time and just tighten the clamps really slowly. Take your time with it, and eventually the top will settle down and quit moving around. You have to reach under there and feel that the bottom is flat. And when you get it pretty close, then that's about the time to try another clamp across the top. It's doesn't seem to be matching up the way I want it to, and I'm not exactly sure why. Kind of buckling a little bit more than normal. It's really the first time I've used these square clamps, and I'm wondering if that's got something to do with it. It feels pretty good right now. Let me get some more clamps. That really seems to have made the difference. That really, I see more glue squeeze out now just by putting these two clamps on there. Double checking to make sure everything is in alignment. Feels pretty good, and everything seems good and tight now. I'm going to take it off the table and double check it. I'm just holding it here where I can see it real well. It's just a hair off on the right here. It's not perfect. It's pretty good right here, but it's a little bit off. And when I'm talking a little bit off, I'm talking like a millimeter or less. But I believe that'll be sufficient. Everything looks really good. We'll be able to make that work. I'm going to go ahead and call that good. I'm satisfied that the joint is very tight. So, we'll let that set for 24 hours. It's the next day. Sorry the furnace is running, so you'll hear that. I just thought I'd show you where I'm at. The mandolin top has glued up perfectly. It's real nice and flat across it. That's a good test, is to check diagonally to make sure your top is good and flat, and this one's very flat. There's some glue squeeze out there that's holding my ruler up a little bit, but other than that, it's perfectly flat. So I'm real happy with that glue up on the top. I'm getting ready to glue up the back, and you can probably see how the back is book matched there. And it grew like this, and you open it up like so, and that's about as close to book match as you're going to get, even though that's the inside and we're carving the outside. But as you carve closer to that inside, it becomes more book matched, if you will. So, but the problem is that this piece was super thick. This piece not so much. It was relatively thin, although it's much thicker than I need. So what I did was I just resawed this off of this side here to make it the same thickness as this one. It just makes the glue up a little easier. Plus, you get the bonus of saving this piece of wood. You know, I guess I'm a wood hoarder. I've got more of this than I'll ever use if I live to be 100. It is a real nice piece of curly maple. Of course, it's thick and then it tapers to a wedge, but yet it's thick enough you could probably get a piece of a side out of this, or you could at least thin it down and make a nice piece of inlay or something out of it. It's useful. I just have a problem throwing stuff like this away, and I don't really need it. Mother Nature took, hundreds of years to grow it. I just have a problem throwing it in the trash. So this will go on the shelf, and someday it may find its way into another instrument. You just never know. They often do. It's not real exciting, but I am feeding this top through this to get it down to the proper thickness. I have checked it with a straight edge, and as you can see probably in the camera, it's absolutely perfectly flat. Couldn't be any flatter. You can't even see any light through there. It's very flat on the back side, or on the inside, I guess you'd say. This is the outside, and I'm feeding it through there to reduce the thickness, because when I start carving, I like to have it at a certain thickness before I start the carving process. So here we go. Well, in that I've got a lot more of that to do. I don't see any point in filming it. I'll just get her down to the thickness I want, and then we'll show you the next process. I'm going to trace my pattern for the neck profile, and for the most part I just trace the corners and then use a straight edge to draw the lines, because my pattern's pretty good, but it's not perfect. Well, I think that looks pretty good. You can see how it follows, and we will cut that profile out now. One of the things that I quite often do is I get ahead of myself, especially on the neck building, and I forget to cut the truss rod channel while this is still squared up. So I thought of it this time, and I'm going to do that, and we're going to get that cut. I've already got everything set just about right. We're going to try a center line first, and I have it set about 3/8 of an inch deep, roughly. I shut it off temporarily to test my truss rod fit, and it's just a little bit tight. It sort of goes, but we're going to have to open it up just a little bit more. Well, I don't like to say everything is a perfect fit, but that's pretty close to a perfect fit. It almost has no play side to side, almost none. And it goes down in there nice and deep, about 3/8 of an inch or so to the bottom of the trench. So that should work just perfectly for our needs. We're going to saw out the profile on this neck, and got everything ready to go. After cutting out the profile, one of the first things I generally do is come over here and flatten off the peg head side. This would be where the peg head overlay will go. That gets it nice and flat and smooth, and that's what we can build off of there. I made up some wings to put on the sides of the peg head. These were cut from the same stock. Just a real thin coverage there. Looks like it's got pretty good coverage, so we'll just set it on here. Let me double check that. Yeah, it looks good. Making sure I got it in the right place. I like to use the vise on this because it's got the 2 bars across the bottom that let me line up everything, get it flat. Got the parallel sides. It's about as good as it gets on something like this. I can just keep putting a little bit of pressure on it to that should be real good. Doesn't need a ton of pressure on that, just enough to keep it real solid. Feels real perfect. So we'll give that overnight to set up too. The sander just isn't cutting it on cutting this down. It's just taking forever, and you can see it's just burning and everything. So I'm going to try to use the planer, although it's not always a good idea on this hard maple. It could chip it out really bad. We have a long way to go, so here's a good time to try it. It's doing a nice job on this, and I'm going to pause for a second and double check my measurements before I go any further. I've got her down to the size I want, and I've got it aligned on the center line and trying to get it exact, and then we trace around it. I have learned to trace around it with a marker so that the line is a little wider, and then I stay outside that line. I missed a line. Never fails. Well, that should be good. And you know, I also have the word top written on here so I don't get confused, because you can flip it over and draw the wrong direction. And so anyway, that's perfect. We're going to cut that out now.
Sunlight, that black horseshoe shine, it reminds me of a...
Well, all the way around, I left the black line and even a little bit of white outside the black line, except in here, and this area here is always tight, so I always have to cut out the full black line and everything in here. Otherwise, it works out just about perfect to do it that way.
Better times, back to a time our love was new, when all my days are filled with dreams of you. Lonely evenings that I spend at home, still keep your picture by my telephone. Oh, what I'd give if that old phone would ring, to hear your voice and all the joy it brings. All my dreams have a bitter end, we're always in our cars and leave again. We're not lovers now, we're only friends. I wished I'd loved you more back then.
Well, that'll do me for now. I'll go over to the smaller bandsaw and do the detail in there. I'm going to route around this outer edge to just get myself a thickness that I can carve to.
On the weekends when you bring the kids by, as you leave I hide the tears in my eyes. I'm always happy to see our children, but I wished I'd loved you more back then. And on the Sundays when
as you can tell by the fact that I am just coated in sawdust, this doesn't make much of a mess. Yeah, right. No, it does just makes a terrible mess. But I've got both of them routed out. I thought, well, while I've got such a mess here to clean up anyway, I might as well go ahead and take the grinder and rough carve these outer surfaces just a little bit. I don't go very much with the grinder. I just, you know, with my arthritis these days, it just knock it down so that it just makes it easier on the arthritis.
Kids home, I see your shadow in the door alone. I try to fight it, but my lips say your name. My mind knows better, but my heart.
Well, the top and the back are both rough carved with just the grinder, and of course they're nowhere near finished. But I take my little finger plane now and just start doing this, and you know, 8 or 10 hours later it'll be done. And yes, I do know about CNC carving routers, you know. I know what they are. I don't own one, and I'm not sure I would ever use one on this application anyway, although I might. My arthritis gets bad enough, I won't rule one out. But right now I can carve it, and believe it or not, this actually carves pretty fast. The very final detail carving is what takes all the time. The rough carving is 20% of the time. That final detail carving, where I'm carving those few thousandths of an inch, that takes 80% of the time. Not going to film a ton of this because it's just this repetition over and over and over and over and over. That's about 1.5 hours of rough carving. This is kind of a before, even though this is the back, but it kind of give you an idea. You know, I went from that, pretty much the same thing, to this in about an hour, hour and a half. I've already vacuumed up the shavings at least once, so you know, this is not all the shavings by any stretch. Probably at least twice that much, plus there's quite a bit on the floor, so to give you an idea. Not too bad for a rough carved instrument. In some respects, it's probably as close as some of the factory carved instruments already. This is where the work starts, really. Getting it rough carved is just a good beginning. That's really the truth of it. Of course, I have not touched the inside. The inside is totally flat.
And all my dreams have a bitter end. We're always in our cars and leave again. We're not lovers now, we're only friends. I wish I'd loved you more back then.
It's been a week or more of other farm projects that's kept me from working on this, but I'm back to it today, and I have my toothed plane. Can you see the little teeth on the blade there? And those teeth are going to help me level all of the previous planing marks out. I don't like to carve the inside until I'm pretty happy with the outside. And right now the outside is close, but it just needs some leveling and just some more detail. And this toothed blade helps me get that detail. Now that I've got it pretty level with the toothed plane, I am going around it with the scraper now and smoothing it out. I've done a lot of this. I've done a lot of feeling, and you know, any place I feel a high spot or whatever, I took it off with this. So it really feels very, very smooth now. And this just, it contours it and makes it smooth all in the same motion. It gets rid of all the little marks. So basically, this is what they used to use in the old days, just a scraper. Sometimes they used a piece of glass. But anyway, it just makes it really smooth. And if you're really good with a scraper, you don't need to sand at all. I'll be honest and tell you that I'm pretty good with a scraper, but I generally always sand in addition. So again, that's all I'm doing. I'm not going to film any more of that. That's what I have to do to get it really smooth before I start on the inside. I have the top carved pretty close. I mean, it's probably not there yet. I don't think I've ever got one completely finished before I've carved the inside, because once I start carving the inside, I start noticing things on the outside, and then I carve it a little more. But I think we're at least to the point where we can carve the inside now. Got it scraped pretty smooth. It's not anywhere near perfect, but it's sufficient, I think. So that's what we need right now. And so let's go ahead and pencil in the outline. What I typically do is just kind of give myself a ballpark, you know, pencil line here. Roughly a little over a 1/4 inch in. It's just an eyeball reference more than anything. And that's about all we can draw in there. Now we'll put the little patterns in here and draw the rest of it. So now that I've got that marked off, I'll take the hand grinder rasp, just knock out some of this just to get a little bit of head on it. I definitely don't even try to get close with that, just to knock out some of the heavy material. Now that I've got it rough shaped and those holes there as my guide, I can just very quickly hand carve it to the depth of those holes. It doesn't take me very long with this to get there. In fact, I can almost do it as fast as I can do it with the grinder. But this is much more accurate and much more deliberate. So this way I know I'm not getting it too deep. Yeah, if you get these things sharp, especially the small one, it's so easy to carve with. You can get them bigger, but those bigger ones are harder to push. I prefer the small one. Even when I get this carved, I will be, you know, a long way from where the final is. So, you know, this is just rough carving at this point. That's all this is. It's just quick removal of the wood.
Dreams have a bitter end. We're always in our cars and leave again. We're not lovers now, we're only friends. I wish I'd loved you more back then.
It's getting, you know, in the ballpark of where I start to care about everything. You know, you can still see the little pecks where the drill's poked little holes there yet. Still just the tip of the drill. It's already starting to make a real nice note. About that long, I can hear the sustain. So pretty good. Going to be a wonderful top. I don't want to downplay it and make it seem like it's just real simple, but you know, if you do the certain things, just about guarantee you're going to have a good instrument. And that is, if you select great wood, and if you take the time to carve it to the proper thicknesses, it'll be great. You can't hardly go wrong. Well, I'm just going to keep carving on this. There's no point in showing any more of it. I'll just carve it until I get it where it needs to be, and then we'll show you what it sounds like at that point. Well, friends, I just thought I would use Melissa as a guinea pig. I just want her to describe to you the difference in what she hears. Now, I have not coached her. All I have told her is that I'm going to tap both of these close to her ear, and I just want her to give you the honest impression of what she's hearing. So step over here where they can see you. Let me tap this one first. By the way, this is an Alvarez, which was considered to be one of the top of the line Alvarez at the time. I don't know when it was made, but I'm going to guess in the 70s or somewhere in that range. I took it apart probably in the late 80s and put a new top on this mandolin. Anyway, so I'm just tapping on this to let her hear it. Okay, you don't have to say anything yet, just... Now, when I tap on this one, just describe the difference of what you hear.
Oh, wow, big difference.
Okay, so what's the difference?
That sounds more like you're tapping on plywood, and that it's kind of almost dull.
Yeah,
This has a higher, yeah, sounds more solid.
Yeah. What about the length of time you can hear it?
Oh, longer length of time.
You can hear this longer than this one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a short.
This is a very short sound. So she's hearing, you know, a higher tone, and she's also hearing, you know, it ring longer. The way I describe it is you can actually hear a note in this. When you hit this, it's kind of like tapping on a 2x4. You just kind of hear a, you know, and that's all you hear, just a thud. This actually rings, and you can hear the note about that long. About like that. So there's the difference. Now, some people will say, well, this one's finished. This one has a finish on it, and it has bracing. Yes, that's true, and the finish probably would knock it down a little bit, but the bracing should actually pick it up. And the other thing is, this one is finish carved. This one is just very rough carved. I haven't even started the detail carving on this yet. So when I carve this one more, this one will just get better and better. So it's just going to get louder and more sustained as I go further. So I just thought you might like to hear a non-biased opinion. The only other thing I will just add to what you just saw there and heard is that there's no graduation at all to that top, that Alvarez top. Now, you might say, well, try a Kentucky. Well, I have a Kentucky that is exactly like that. And as a matter of fact, I can even prove, and I have proved on video before, that the same man made both of those tops. Believe it or not, whether you believe it or not, I can prove that they did. So my point is that the Kentucky is exactly like that Alvarez. Exactly. And I mean to the 1,000th of an inch. It was carved on the same machine. The same man put the braces in it and everything, and you can tell because of his pencil marks. I mean, they're identical. And anyway, the point is that there's no graduation to those tops. They're just carved on a machine, and they're just dished out, and they're all at about, you know, I don't even remember the thousandths of inches, but I'm just going to say they're all at maybe 150 thousandths inches or 200 thousandths. I don't know. But the point is that they're just exactly the same everywhere. There's no graduation. This one will have all sorts of graduations throughout the whole thing. It will not be the same thickness pretty much anywhere. You know, there may be some duplicate thicknesses in places, but my point is, as it moves across the top, it changes in thickness as it goes across the top. So there's the main difference between a handmade and a store-bought type instrument. I've been carving quite a while. I've put all my measurements in here. I pencil them in, and then I carve them back out. You know, and I'm still a ways from final. But I thought I'd let you hear it again just along the progress and see if you can hear it. Again, I know for most of you, especially if you're watching it on a phone or a small tablet, the sound just won't be there. But if you're watching it on a pretty, high-end stereo system, then you'll probably be able to hear some of that sound and some of that tone. It's really coming along. You know, I can tell you, sitting here listening to it, it's going to be a boomer. It's really got some tone in this wood. And we just keep carving. At this point, I have carved, it really smooth in here, and I've used the tooth plane to level it back out. I'm going to test all of my measurements again, write them down one more time, and carve it one more time at least, and possibly more than once. But I may be able to get there just in one more effort here. I'm getting near the end of the carving on this, and I thought I'd show you how deep it is. You can see it's about, roughly 3/8 of an inch deep. That just gives you some idea. It's hard to tell on camera how much something is curving, but it's got quite a bit of a curve to it. Let's see, it should measure about the same this way, I would think. Give you some idea what it's like. I also take my darker ruler like this and put it across the top, and then I look at the angles on both sides to see if they're symmetrical, and it looks real good. I'm getting toward the end of the carving on this. I'm going to smooth it out with a scraper, and then I'm going to do some fine measuring and try to take it down to those last few thousandths. I've got the mandolin carved pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. Checked all the thicknesses. It's got a lot of tone. Very good sounding top. Everything's really good. I've weighed it, and at this point it weighs 120 grams. Actually, probably a hair less than that because I've taken a little more off of it since then. But I'm going to now carve out all of the extra waste wood in here. Not that it really makes much difference other than it just lightens it up.
You won't find it on a well-traveled highway. Not even.
Like I said, it probably won't make much difference in terms of sound, but in general terms, light is generally better than heavy on instruments. And the only reason I say generally is because there are occasions where weight does add sustain in places, but we're not worried about sustain in this particular instance. And I'll just take and get in there with some small tools and smooth that all out so that it looks nice. I don't like to leave things rough. So anyway, once I get that done, I'll give it a final weight. Just in case you're keeping score, it is 118 grams exactly right now. Now, I am going to mark where I want the bracing, and on my same pattern here I have the bracing marked out a little bit, and all I do is I just draw the outer ends of each piece and then just connect the dots. So now I can take a ruler and lay it in there and draw that. Actually, I typically don't even draw these in because all I have to do is put the bracing to the end points. That's really all that matters. I normally don't even draw these lines, just doing it for demonstration purposes. So that's how the braces will go in, and you can see there that this one's at a different angle than this one. This one's almost parallel with the top. It's a slight angle, but this one's a considerable angle here. Well, friends, can you say, I need a bigger laser cutter? I wanted to use my laser cutter to cut the F-holes in this. I even took the time to make the software for it. After laying it out in the software and then trying to do test cuts on paper, if the thing was just a ½ inch bigger, it would work. I just need another ½ inch. And I can't find a place to get it in there. The critical parts are in the way. It's not so much, the floor space or whatever, it's that if I slide it one direction in order to get where that F-hole needs to be, it runs into one of the spinning rails, and it just needs another ½ inch, that's all. I need a bigger laser cutter. And I might just be getting one. But for now, we'll have to go do it the old-fashioned way. And being that I'm going to cut it out by hand, I always do like to have the gauze in here first. I probably would have put the gauze in there anyway, even if the laser cutter was cutting it. For sure, if I'm going to cut it by hand, I want the gauze in there first because the gauze helps strengthen this when you're sawing on it. There's a lot of flex in this area, or there can be. I try to minimize it as much as possible. I think I got it there, although maybe not. So now I'll use that where I can put my gauze down and cover that area.
On a dusty gravel road, and you have to want to be there when you find it, for it's not on any maps I know. Out across the field through the pasture, climb along a steep and rocky trail. When you cross that little creek in the valley, you'll see that vine-covered church on the hill. That vine-covered church above the valley, where the congregation gathered to pray. Built with their hands from the forest, now stands as a marker for the grave. windows are tattered, the steeple leans slightly to the right, and though all the windows are shattered, you can still hear them singing at night. The brothers and sisters who worship gather in that holy place still, though they lie at rest in the valley beneath that vine-covered church on the hill. That vine-covered church above the valley, where the congregation gathered to pray, built with their hands from the forest, now stands as a marker for the grave. Church above the valley, where the congregation gathered to pray, built with their hands from the forest, now stands as a marker for the graves. It still stands as a marker for the graves.
We've got the plug made for this, and now we just got to put it in place. And when we put this in, the grain is going this way on this, is going opposite the rest of the grain. And now we'll just put a piece of leather under there. And in fact, we might even put a block of wood under there. I think I'll just put a block of wood under there instead of the leather. And the reason being is that it'll spread the stress out that much more, because this is going to be forced down in there. It's a little bit tight. I don't care about leather on the top because it's going to be cut off anyway. It's not going to go all the way down in there. It's going to go pretty close, but not quite all the way. We've just about got it bottomed out there, as you can see. That's about bottomed out right there. Good and tight. And the glue is squeezing out of there. That'll just make that joint that much stronger and less likely to break that peg off if it ever gets bumped real hard or dropped or whatever. So we'll let that sit for 30 minutes or so, and then we'll clean that up. Would like to tell you that that was easy, but it never is. It just never is. I don't know why that's so hard. It just always catches. It's so tedious, and you know that any second you're going to break it if you're not careful. using one of the scalpels that Chuck sent to me. Thank you, Chuck. It's only fitting that Chuck sends scalpels because apparently Chuck is a doctor, and I think he's a retired doctor. Well, I would like to tell you that's easy, but that ain't easy. That's really hard on your hands. I may try a new scalpel blade now. That blade may be damaged on the tip, I'm not sure at this point. They hold up a little better than the X-Acto blades. That's why I use it for the carving, because it's very difficult to carve this stuff. Let's see how it carves. Very difficult, because each of those curls is very hard. And so basically you got to carve away. Everything that's not a rose has to come out of there. A lot of carving like that. You can't really tell what I'm doing, I don't think. I'm just beveling away everything and leaving the rose stand up. I'm not going to film any more of it because it just takes forever. I've been working off camera quite a bit on this mandolin. I've got quite a bit of progress made. You can see I've got the top completely finished, got the kerf lining all inside the mandolin, and I've just got these little temporary braces in there just to keep it spread out as I glue on the top. And I think we're ready to do that. I don't see a problem, so let's get her done. Might have a little more glue on there in places than I need, so I'm just going to kind of go through there and just kind of ration it out a little bit. I don't like a ton of squeeze out on something like this. I just want to get good coverage. I think that ought to do. And now I'll just put some weights on this to hold it in place. There's quite a bit of weight on this. This probably weighs 3 pounds. I checked to make sure it didn't seem to sink the top any, and it didn't. The rest of these probably weigh, you know, a pound a piece or a little more maybe. They're all around the edges where the, you know, the strength is, and so there shouldn't be a problem there at all. And they're all on leather or some other material to keep them from contacting the wood, so nothing is in contact with the wood directly. But that should make it work. I think we'll let that sit still for a while, you know, a couple hours, and then I'll come and remove the weights off of it. As you can see, we've got our cut out there. That's what it looks like on the bottom side, and that's what it looks like on the top side. And so basically we just break these out, then we just start shaping it to fit what we need. See how it's going to fit down in there, but it takes a lot of hand shaping, and I'm not going to film all this, but I basically just get in here and just cut it out like so. These outside pencil marks is my actual lines, so I'm a pretty good distance from those, but the thing is the angle wouldn't let me get any closer, so I'll just have to cut the rest of that by hand or some other method. But right now I'm just cleaning out the bulk. Once again, I've gone to the microscope to get down to the detail on this carving. You know, as detailed as this is, you would think that it really wouldn't help you that much because it's so small. You'd still have to be working in these little tiny dimensions. But when you blow it up like this, you actually get the feeling that you're working on something much bigger. Now, granted, your tool movements are very tiny, but under the scope they look big, and you get the impression that you're really working on something much larger than what you're working on. It's not nearly as intimidating as you might expect once you go to the microscope. In fact, it's not too bad at all. It's a great deal of help. I'm sure glad I bought it. It was a considerable chunk of change, but I gotta tell you, I'm really glad I got it. Especially the older I get, more tired my eyes get. This really does save all that frustration. And you can really get into the detail. And the thing about it is, under the microscope, because it blows it up so large, you really think, well, it looks kind of bad. If you can get it even looking reasonably okay under the microscope, then when you look at it with your naked eye, it looks wonderful. And you think, golly, that looks great. You know, you can't get rid of every little tiny mark, but you can get rid of most of them. And I'm just using this little tiny chisel thing that I made. I'm using it as a scraper. And I'm getting in there and just removing little fine marks. That's what the little chisel looks like. But it really does work well. I know you can't really see what I'm doing. At least you've got an idea of what's going on, and you can see how I go about it. I'm just looking through the microscope and working this little tiny chisel, and I'll be doing that for another 45 minutes to an hour, I imagine. So I'm not going to eat up any more video with that, but at least you know what I'm doing.